On that same night, in the same jungle, there were three different kinds of darkness. In the western sector of Sarawak, a British 22 SAS, four-man patrol advanced in total silence toward a border crossing that existed on no official map and would never appear in any official record. Their faces stained black, every metal surface taped weeks earlier. They had not spoken for 11 hours. They moved in a way that barely resembled normal walking. Each foot lifted and set down with deliberate care, because they knew a single dry leaf snapped at the wrong moment could decide success or failure. About 140 miles to the east along the Shu central border of Borneo, an Australian SASR patrol remained completely still. They had not moved for 4 hours. Beside the patrol commander and Iman, Tracker lay with fingertips pressed to the forest floor, reading pressure patterns in the leaf litter that no Western training could interpret. He had discovered something and was confirming it before signaling. Around them, the jungle breathed in a heavy darkness, the kind that exists at midday under triple canopy, and at 3 in the morning feels less like night sky and more like being inside a sealed room. Farther east, a New Zealand SAS patrol occupied a harbor position on a ridge whose commanding height made it the most exposed and dangerous patrol zone in the entire theater. They were so motionless that insects had resumed their normal sounds. In jungle warfare, that is a precise indicator. It means the environment has accepted the patrol as part of itself rather than an intrusion. They achieved this in 40 minutes. Exceptional by most standards, but routine for them. 3 patrols, 3 sectors, 3 nations. 1 secret order, 1 absolute rule shared by all. No prisoners, no abandoned wounded, no physical proof of Commonwealth forces on Indonesian soil they were about to enter. Their governments knew they were there, had sent them, and had already prepared official language to deny everything. The British government would maintain denial until 1974, Australia until 1996. New Zealanders who died there fell in a war their country would not officially acknowledge for 30 years. This was the first time United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand fought together separately in the same secret across 1,000 miles of jungle. Building in darkness, something the official record pretended for decades did not exist. Conflict had a name few citizens ever heard. Confrontasi, confrontation, yet the word barely captured reality. It was a deliberate campaign by Indonesian President Sukarno to destroy the newly formed nation of Malaysia before it could stabilize. Using infiltration, political pressure, and the geography of Borneo to impose a costly war Britain might abandon as it withdrew from empire. His logic was not irrational. The British Empire in the early 1960s was visibly shrinking. The Federation of Malaya gained independence in 1957. Singapore became self-governing by 1959. Britain's plan to create Malaysia, combining Malaya, Singapore, North Borneo, and Sarawak, aimed to transfer power to a stable regional structure rather than leave a vacuum. Sukarno saw instead a disguised continuation of colonial influence and declared Shenyang Malaysia. Crush Malaysia. The December 1962 revolt in Brunei marked the opening shot. Rebels attempted to seize the Sultan oil facilities and European hostages simultaneously. They failed. British forces flew in from Singapore within 30 hours. Gurkha troops secured the palace before suppression was complete. Indonesia denied involvement only until evidence proved otherwise. By April 1963, Indonesian forces began direct infiltrations across the Sarawak border, and an undeclared war was underway. The border stretched roughly 1,000 miles, comparable to the distance from London to Warsaw, but through triple canopy jungle. Mountains 7,000 feet high, rivers that flooded during monsoon and shrank in dry season. Terrain so poorly mapped that planners relied on surveys decades old or non-existent. Just north of the equator, with over 118 inches of annual rain, no roads across most of it, helicopters were essential, yet frequently grounded by weather. The areas most vital to defend were also hardest to supply, and reinforced Britain could not allow failure at this moment. General Walter Walker arrived with rare qualifications for a British commander of the era. Deep jungle counterinsurgency experience, his doctrine emphasized presence and intelligence over firepower. Know crossing points before the enemy uses them. Maintain constant border presence. Locate infiltrators quickly. Australia joined out of national interest rather than imperial duty. Instability to its north was not an abstract issue. The SASR arrived in early 1965, carrying 15 years of Malayan jungle experience distilled into doctrine. New Zealand contributed smaller numbers and often overlooked forces. 7 New Zealanders would die in Borneo without public acknowledgement of their mission. The jungle itself was the first shared enemy. Triple canopy meant a top layer at 150 feet, blocking aerial observation. A second at 70 feet, reducing light. A third at 30 feet, creating permanent green darkness even at midday. Rivers could rise 6 feet overnight, turning paths into streams. Equipment soaked on day 1 of a 3-week patrol never fully dried. Leeches filled boots and uniforms, attaching in numbers that required discipline to ignore. All while facing an enemy who knew the terrain intimately. Walker's key decision was not merging forces, but assigning each regiment to a sector where its strengths mattered most. British 22 SAS took western Sarawak with politically sensitive crossings and infiltration routes near populated targets. Australian SASR held central areas demanding long patrols without resupply, where enemy activity was most aggressive. New Zealand SAS covered eastern sectors and highest risk zones where detection danger was greatest. Manned patrols were the fundamental unit everywhere. Yet each regiment used them differently. British patrols applied methodical experience built from earlier operations, maintaining tree-based observation posts for days to monitor Indonesian positions. They noticed behavioral changes, such as relaxed soldiers becoming constantly alert after contacts. Evidence of psychological impact rather than just numbers. Australian patrols moved with extreme environmental integration, developed during years in Malaya. The SASR shuffle involved lifting and placing each foot with full attention. Pace determined by terrain rather than schedule. Distances taking 4 hours for Australians might take 40 minutes for conventional units. Not inefficiency, but investment in invisibility. IBAN trackers were essential partners, not auxiliaries. Reading broken spider webs, compressed leaf litter, bird alarm patterns indicating human presence before patrols could detect it themselves. Zealand patrols operated with uncompromising silence discipline, born from being the smallest force with no margin for mistakes. If compromised, they could not rely on large reinforcements. Their precision was not just stricter discipline, but a distinct operational character. Achieving environmental absorption in 40 minutes until insects resumed normal sounds. Operation Claret, the code name for cross-border raids into Indonesian Kalimantan, involved small reconnaissance teams penetrating Indonesian territory to observe bases and supply routes for days without engagement. Intelligence-guided conventional defenses with unmatched accuracy. Strict rules remained: no prisoners, no abandoned casualties, no evidence left behind. Penetration limits increased after a battle where 35 British paratroopers held off 400 Indonesian soldiers for 2 hours until helicopters arrived. Demonstrating the scale of threat alongside patrol operations, ran a parallel hearts and minds campaign. Not charity, but intelligence strategy. In terrain where technology could not locate the enemy, local inhabitants were the only reliable source of information. British forces built trust through medical aid and consistent presence. Australian forces emphasized respect for indigenous knowledge, creating reciprocal relationships. Indigenous scouts provided route knowledge, cross-border awareness, and tracking skills no external force could develop. Quickly, communities that trusted Commonwealth forces shared information. Those that did not remain silent. Indonesian interactions were often coercive and produced little cooperation. Over time, the intelligence environment increasingly favored Commonwealth forces. By mid-1965, Indonesian confidence that Malaysia was indefensible had eroded. Cross-border operations disrupted staging areas. Local intelligence allowed interceptions before infiltrators reached targets. Observation showed Indonesian troops remaining constantly alert. Camps once relaxed, now fearful of unseen enemies. They were hunting forces they could not find. In September 30, 1965, a coup attempt in Jakarta killed 6 Indonesian generals before being suppressed. The resulting political upheaval shattered the foundations of Confrontasi. Sukarno's authority weakened amid domestic crisis and massive violence. Peace negotiations followed. The Bangkok Accord in May 1966 and a formal treaty on August 11 ended a war never officially declared. Casualties recorded included 607 Commonwealth personnel and at least 590 Indonesians, with actual numbers likely higher due to unacknowledged losses. Many deaths resulted from helicopter accidents caused by terrain and weather. Acts of bravery, such as a Gurkha soldier destroying a machine gun position under fire and rescuing wounded comrades, earned the campaign's only Victoria Cross, yet occurred in a war publicly unrecognized. What the 3 SAS regiments built together was never formally celebrated. Returning soldiers came home to populations unaware they had been fighting. What remained was doctrine rather than monuments. The 4-man patrol model became foundational for special operations worldwide, influencing later units and tactics, emphasizing patience, environmental integration, small unit autonomy. The 5 power defense arrangements of 1971 later formalized cooperation, but the real alliance had already been forged in the jungle through shared secret purpose and parallel risk. Soldiers from the 3 nations did not need treaties to define their relationship. Experience had done that. They entered the jungle with flags folded away, fought a war their governments denied, shaped the political balance of Southeast Asia and the future of special operations, maintained silence as long as classification required, and no longer. What was protected was not merely secrecy, but an alliance formed through shared danger. 3 regiments. One jungle, one secret that outlived the men who carried it. The jungle kept no record, absorbed their presence, resumed its sounds when they departed, exactly as they intended. Perfect invisibility, leaving only results. 3 separate darknesses along one border, the first time Britain, Australia, and New Zealand fought together in this way, and likely the last conflict of such scale and sophistication, conducted in such complete silence. Each nation held its sector with methods denied for 30 years. British experience in the West, Australian environmental mastery in the center, New Zealand precision in the East. 3 distinct contributions, producing an outcome none could achieve alone. When documents were finally released decades later, the story that emerged was not of identical efforts, but of complementary ones. 3 nations doing different things in different places that combined into a flawlessly executed secret war carried out by professionals who understood both the mission and the necessity of silence. One at the cost of lives largely unknown even at home, and concluded by governments unable to fully explain what had made peace possible in the first place.